On September 27, 2020, large-scale war broke out. Azerbaijan launched an air to a missile attack in the direction of Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia, Artsakh, and mobilization was announced. And it has impacted the community of Goris. It has changed the understanding of people about the past and the future. There are new perceptions which have been developed in the city, and there are not only social but also security issues. Very often in the bordering provinces there are some controversies and conflicts which turn into debates and leading to disappointment and mistrust towards the state. So we would like to understand what people think about the border, how their perceptions have changed, their special memories changed, their perceptions about the Azeris. And the urgency of such research is based on the interest of the state and the citizens to present the realities and also propose some solutions. The goal is to collect memories and perceptions of the people to understand how the urban realities have changed, how the people have changed their perceptions, what kind of cultural and social issues have been created, what dualistic interpretations there are about the war and the consequences of the war, and how the reality is perceived in a city which is far from the capital. As people say, the Goris is surrounded by Azeri forces, and people are comparing it with the situation with the Soviet times when there were no Turks living in Goris. Some segments of the road connecting Goris to Kapan are now passing through Azeri territory. In those areas, the Azeris have started to wave the Azeri flags. And people show how the road became partially going to the Azeri territory, though they refer also to the Soviet time. To Soviet times maps. There are also some issues with the water supply, which is basically related to the fact that the Azeri soldiers are now near the Sevlij and the fact that the Azeri blog post was introduced on the road created some issues for the surrounding villages, and that has impacted the situation in Goris and the perceptions people have. In Sunik, we had a large number of Azeris living in those areas. In Goris, we also had some Azeris living, but it is interesting to note that Azeri segment was not visible in Goris. In Goris market, you basically had Azeris. They were selling their produce, buying some commodities and living back. They were negotiating the prices, they were selling quite cheap products. They were trying to maintain good relations with people in Goris. Goris played an important role for them because they had no alternative. So the Azeris were moving through Goris, taking back and forth their livestock and using community lands in order to transit their livestock. People working at the industrial plants were receiving apartments for their employees. However, no apartments were provided to Azeris, but other services were offered to them at the cost of the city budget. Azeri and Turkish and Armenian officials were exchanging gifts. Their relations were based on the mutual respect and trust. I have seen the gifts myself during the interviews that those officials have exchanged at some point. In 1923, Azerbaijan created, so to speak, Red Kurdistan, Lachin Ghobatlo, and Zangilan districts. Then it was changed into new administrative units, and Zangilan became a border province with Iran. Then okrugs as administrative units have been again reorganized, and they returned into districts, rayons. And Lachin and other regions remained under the Kurdish rule. So, in other words, they spoke Kurdish instead of Turkish. Axel Bakuns, in his novel, speaks about the issues related to delineation and demarcation. So, a commission on delineation between Kurdistan and Zangilan was formed of Karayev from Azeri side, from Bakuns from the Soviet Armenian side. On September 10, they resumed their work. Starting from September 10, 1925, they started to work on field to learn from the experiences of people and then to delineate the border. The main weakness was that it never took into account what is the economic center for that rayon or village, and what is the population of that.
This result of delineation was explained by Dizeris by the land cultivation work not starting by that time. The main shortfall was that in drawing the border, the committee did not factor in the number of the population, how much land the village had, and what were the links between the neighbors. Which region does it gravitate to economically or not? The only basis was what the population was ethnically comprised of. About the Kurdistan villages, there were no accurate data. It was not known neither the numbers of population nor the area of land. But in drawing the borders, this was not looked at the per inhabitant area of land, which is why in Zangezur the villages had less land as a result. The Turkish villages had shanties that wanted to merge with Kurdistan, and they asked the border to be drawn at a certain distance from the village, in which case most of the contested lands were left with them. After the period, mostly the pastures determined the determination of land. In the Soviet times, there were cases when the borders were drawn upon internal agreement to the detriment of the Armenian party, because the belonging of the village lands was ignored, whereas the Azeri villages were in those contested areas where they had to do the delineation. The Azeris mostly were herders. As a result, they spread out, expanded over the Armenian territories. As a result, the issue of the Red Lakes emerged, which does not have a clear borders drawn. In the Soviet period, there were areas handed over to Azeris for grazing and pastures. The representatives of that period clearly remember the borders that existed during the Soviet period. There were truly Azeri populated villages on Goris Kapan Highway, Nivasar, Davutlu, and Chayzanlu. In the event of Shurnukh, on the one side of the road there were Azeris, on the other Armenians. In the event of Shurnukh, the Armenian population left their village, leaving the houses abandoned, and the Azeris grew subsequently in numbers. The respondents claimed that during the Soviet time there was clear policy, that is, to allow Azeri elements to peacefully establish on Armenian territory, do their herding, grazing and pastures, ignoring that such internal delineation could have become a controversy subsequently between the two nations. The respondents also told that during the Soviet period, local administrations, so to say, were trading spaces. Land were swooped upon the tacit agreement of the officials on both sides, and some respondents claimed this was because of corrupt risks, and some claimed this was agreed on by the center to give comfortable grazing land to Azeris. One respondent says that the first secretary of the district committee agreed with the woman who was the Lachin secretary, and they were intimate. In order for the Azeris to graze their cattle, they gave a lot of land from Armenia, and apparently that stays to this day. The swapping of grasslands was mostly orally agreed upon. There is no document to corroborate this fact. Already in 21, since October, the Goris Kapan highway was almost completely handed over to Azeri control. Since August, in order to get to Kapan, people had to use the Tatev Kapan road, which was repaired in a very short time frame. It was never repaired since the Soviet times, but the population encountered other problems here. The Goris Tatev Kapan road is not intended for heavy trucks, although the Iranian trucks are now using it. In cold winter conditions, this road is impassable even for passenger vehicles. There's an intention to build Tatev Sisian road that would circumnavigate this. There are certain issues for the city of Goris. Prior to the war, Persian trucks were passing through Goris, which was yielding economic benefits. Lots of small and medium enterprises emerged, and there was vibrancy, whereas now the city is circumnavigated by international passageway. The real estate went down, exodus increased, the city is grimmer. This has resulted in security, economic, and cultural issues. There is a serious issue of firewood. People were using firewood to heat the houses. Before the war, they were buying it from the Turks, whereas now it's scarce, the prices have hiked. If we compare the Goris situation with that in the capital, we're dealing with a completely different situation. In the capital, the tensions are higher than in the border communities. There are, of course, issues, and the issues exacerbated, especially then when in May 12, 2021, the Azeri armed forces established in the territory of Sev Lake. After the war, the political situation also got more complicated. The political discord is interpreted by the locals without taking sides. They're disillusioned by the apathy. They're not involved or consulted in public policy, and this results in loss of hope. This uncertainty and non-constructive position distances people from the state. A 62-year-old woman says total uncertainty precludes people from thinking about tomorrow or making plans. No one in the wake of the war came to talk to these people, telling that the war is over, life goes on. There was no discourse on that. There's indifference, and nothing changed in Goris. For the state, all provinces are should be equal. They do not talk to their people. There's lack of jobs already since the Soviet times. There were industrial plants that have shut down since independence. One of the respondents presents their demands. We only have one demand, jobs, so that the people do not leave the town, because you can preclude this, there will be an exodus. Whereas Goris is the gateway. For a woman or for a dignified person, a job addresses a lot of problems. At least 60,000 will be brought home by a woman every month. This is no big issue for the national budget, but it addresses some major issues. In the conditions of Yerevan Goris opposition, it's hard to talk about consensus. This results in disillusionment, exodus, lack of trust towards the government, a new reality emerging. The public policy exacerbates further the contradiction between the state and the citizen. People living along the borders ask for explanations, clear vision, and strategy that would allow them to live in their native land. The state should launch a dialogue with the citizen, consult them about the issues, and inform them about the impediments in the wake of the war, get an idea of how the locals overcome this, make recommendations, adapt the people along the borders to the current situation. As an afterword, the 67-year-old respondent says, "We only demand one thing. Imagine people were asked around the globe, what do you want? They all will say cash, whereas we want jobs. Low paying, but still jobs. We have no other problem. Since the study is incomplete, I've interviewed people in 21 November through December. We do not have any reflection on the Russian presence in Syunik, as well as the ramifications of the Russian-Ukrainian war are not included yet.